In this lesson, we'll learn about background and foreground colors, as well as the color picker here inside of Photoshop. Okay, great. So I've got lesson 21's begin file open here. Now, in previous lessons, you may have heard me refer to background and foreground colors here inside of Photoshop. And that's really when referring to these two little squares right down here inside your tool panel. Now, the one on top that overlaps the other one, that's going to be our foreground color. The one behind is going to be your background color. Really easy to remember. And right now I have them set to the default color scheme inside of Photoshop. So when you launch Photoshop for the first time, your foreground color is going to be set to black and your background color is going to be set to white. Now, this becomes important when we start to think about things like painting with our brush tool here. So if I were to grab that brush tool, and I'm just going to come up here and we'll shrink the size down just a little bit. All right, great. So you can see here, I'm just going to paint right on my background layer here. If I come in and paint with my brush, you can see I'm painting the foreground color here. So we can come in and paint with that. Now, if we wanted to come in and change our foreground color, that's really quite simple. There's actually a number of different ways we can do that. Let me undo that brush stroke here with a Control-Z, and I'm simply going to come over and click on that foreground color. All right, fantastic. Now, I know that I'm changing my foreground color at this point in this dialog because next to color picker up here, it says foreground color. If I were to, let me just cancel that, come over and tap on the background color, you can see that that one says background color, indicating that we're choosing a different background color. All right, so let's cancel that one and go back to our foreground color because this is the basic color picker here inside of Photoshop. You may have seen me pull this up really briefly in a previous lesson, but we're actually going to kind of take a look at this in a good deal of detail. So this particular area right here, you can see it actually has a little circle right down here in the corner. That's the currently selected color. In fact, we can actually come in here and begin to move that little circle around. And as I do that, watch over here under the word new. You'll see that my new color is represented inside this little box right here. So below that we have our current color, and if we ever want to get back to that current color, all we need to do is simply tap on that, and you can see that it resets our new color. So now let's take a look at this box. This box actually gives us, in this case, two basic types of information about the colors we're selecting. So if we were to move this little dot from left to right here, in this particular view, we're actually controlling saturation. So if we actually come over here and look, you can see the saturation percentage right here under HSB, which stands for hue, saturation, and brightness. If you watch, as I begin to drag this left and right, that saturation number is adjusting quite a bit. Now, when we go up and down in this dialog at the current time, it's actually going to adjust the brightness or the luminance. So if we come up and you watch this brightness percentage, right now we're dealing with a very high brightness. And if we pull this down, you'll see that the brightness is actually reducing to a very low percentage. So now, again, this is saturation and brightness controls. Now, in terms of hue, right now, we have this little strip right here, and it's called the hue strip. Now, this actually, if you were to imagine just taking this strip and sort of wrapping it around and connecting the two ends, this would be a pretty standard color wheel. So basically, where it ends right here, just imagine it picking up right down here. So we can actually take and we can tap in here and drag, and you can see we can actually pull these arrows up and begin to select a new hue. Now, this is all we're doing currently with this hue strip because we're right now we have this little dot selecting hue. So this little strip is controlling our hue. So if we wanted sort of a blue color, we could come in here and grab maybe something like that. And you can see if I go ahead and hit OK, that actually assigns that color to my foreground color. Pretty simple, right? Now, if we ever want to come in here and switch the places of our foreground and our background colors, that's really easy to do. All we need to do is tap on this little curved arrow right here. So if I tap that, you'll notice that those two colors switch places. And there's actually a keyboard shortcut assigned to this. So this is something, if you're doing a lot of painting digitally, then this keyboard shortcut is something you'll probably want to remember. So that keyboard shortcut is simply X on your keyboard. So if I hit that X key, you can see I can cycle those back and forth. All right, fantastic. So let's go ahead and hit this little button right here. Now, you remember I mentioned the default colors in Photoshop were to have a black foreground color and a white background color. Now, if I tap this little button, it'll reset back to those defaults. Now, we'll just come in here and make a quick change to our color. And there's actually a keyboard shortcut assigned to that as well. We're going back to the default colors, so remember D on your keyboard. D resets those colors back to their defaults. All right, great. Now, at this point, let's go ahead and dive right back into our color picker here because, again, I mentioned that this is hue saturation, or rather, this is saturation and brightness or luminance, and our hue is being selected right over here. Now, again, that's because this little bullet is right here next to the H in HSB. That means this hue strip is being, or this strip right here is controlling our hue. But if we were to come and switch that to this one here maybe, now this strip is controlling saturation. So if we were to come in and select a hue, moving from left to right here, or a brightness by moving up and down, let's just select maybe this green. You can see I can begin to adjust the saturation of that green with this strip in the center of the color picker. So again, as we kind of click back and forth here, I'll select brightness, and you can see again, now we're working with hue from left to right, saturation up and down, and brightness or luminance moving up and down this strip in the center. So again, I usually typically will leave that on H or hue, just so it's really easy to come in and quickly select just the color you're looking for. Maybe you want this purple color or something like that. Now, again, we obviously have a lot of other numbers down in here. So we have our RGB color model down here. So in the case of maybe we wanted something like a pure blue for RGB. So let's just come in and type in 0, 0, and 255. And you can see we get that blue from the RGB color mode. So again, we could come in and manually type in our values here in the RGB color mode. If we had a CMYK color we were trying to achieve, we could come in and type those ink percentages in right here, and we could actually arrive at that color. So maybe we want 100% cyan. We'll come over here and type in 100 under C, and you can see we get to that cyan color. All right, great. Now, you may have noticed there's a couple of little boxes or warnings that actually pop up right in this area here. Now, let's go ahead and move our color around here just a moment, and you should see one pop up right here. So I'm going to start moving this around. There we go. There's our warning. So this warning indicates that the color we currently have selected is out of gamut. Now, that means that if we're going to a commercial printer, that is not a color that is achievable in a CMYK color mode, or basically that particular gamut. Now, this other warning down here, this indicates that the color we have selected is not a web safe color. So if you're designing for the web and there's actually a specific color gamut that is considered safe for use on the web. So we could come over here and maybe even click on this little box right here, and you can see it will actually divide this area right here into those web safe colors. So with that box checked, you can see here that there's at no time a color that I can select that's going to cause that warning to come up. So let me go ahead and uncheck that box. Again, if you're dealing with colors on the web and you're designing for the web, you may have an instance where you actually need to input a hexadecimal number. That's what this little entry field right down here is for. So you can come in, plug in your value there, or you can select a color here and get its equivalent hexadecimal value right over here. All right, fantastic. So there's one other feature that I want to show you here, and this has to do with kind of when we move our color picker out to the side. So there's some nice color going on in these boats here, but notice as I mouse over this image, my cursor changes to this little eyedropper tool. So we can actually come in and zoom in on the image kind of outside of the color picker by using Control and Spacebar. But what we can do here is we can actually begin to sample colors from our image. In this case, I clicked on kind of this pink color right here. We can come over and maybe select that blue. And you can see it's telling us exactly what that blue is here inside of our color picker. Now, I am actually sampling based on an 11 by 11 pixel average. And this is kind of left over from that lesson several lessons ago, when we were working with our magic wand tool. So if you want a specific point sample, you could just come in here, and wherever you click, it will actually tell you what the color is of that pixel that you clicked on here. So we can come in and select any of these colors in this image. So this is Photoshop's color picker, and in this lesson we've learned about the color picker and how Photoshop's background and foreground colors work. Now, we're going to continue on with this conversation about how we can begin to select and work with color here inside of Photoshop in the next lesson. We're actually going to be learning about the color and swatch panels.